Drew.
A wise man once asked about potentially someone winning with less than 50% of the vote, and that is the effect of this ordinance would be to eliminate the primary, and it would be a winner-take-all election in April. It is plausible, certainly, that someone with less than 50% would win, and that is the main downside to this. The counter-argument is that in the limited time we've been doing this in 92, what year did we go? 2002, okay. We did do some research, and everyone who won the highest percentage of votes ended up winning the second election. So if there was a primary, the person who won the most in the primary won the final. Now, that's not a guarantee. The past is not necessarily indicative of those results. So certainly that is the risk you run by eliminating the primary. The upside of it is that it's a cost savings. You know, generally a full citywide election, I think, averages out about $28,000. So if there's a mayoral primary, it's going to be citywide. So we would save that cost. That would just be put into April. So, you know, I think it is clearly a policy decision for the council to whether or not to put this forward, and it's going to be a decision for the people to make whether they want a primary or not. Major upside is cost. Major downside is the risk of someone winning without a top percentage. It's probably worth saying that we never really get 50% of the people to vote anyway. So even if someone wins 52% of the votes, it's only 52% of the people who elected, which is considerably smaller than 52% of the people as a whole, or all the potential voters.
Drew, I have a question. What do other communities our size? What do most communities our size do?
I wish I still had my paper, and I ended up throwing it away. I did a survey of the typical cities that we look at.
Right.
Most of them have. They are certainly going. They're trending to eliminating the primary and going just to a one general election. There are still a few that do have that. Springfield, I noticed, just changed it, and I can't believe I don't have that paper, but most of them have gone away from it.
From the primary.
From the primary, for the exact same reasons we're talking about here. It's just costly.
Right. Okay, Carrie.
And it may be a good reminder, too, because I know we've had this on here for a few weeks without discussing it, that these were brought to us by the state legislators making changes to election law. So we were kind of faced with
That's right.
making these inconvenient changes. But I think in the end it'll turn out positive. But they didn't give us a whole lot of options, or else we might have kept it the way it was. So we were sort of forced in a way to make these changes.
Yeah, I've kind of let that slide after a couple of weeks. But yes, the legislature changed the law to say that we don't have February anymore unless it's in our charter. We don't have that in our charter currently. Therefore, we're stuck with March. And the downside of having March and April as our primary in general is that you don't get the full time period for absentee ballots, because they can't print those absentee ballots until our primary is over. Now, in just as our previous example, we had a race for Councilman Weber's seat, and one person ended up winning that, but they could not print the ballots for everyone else because they didn't know the outcome of that election yet.
Okay, Ralph.
Drew, we're voting to put it on the ballot.
That's correct.
That's correct. And the ballot, and that would be next April.
Next April, people will decide whether we do this or not. That's correct, 2014.
And the second point is this would only affect nonpartisan races?
Yes, which we don't, of course, have any partisanship anymore, but that's the.
So
it made more sense in partisan races.
This would have no effect on a partisan race?
That's correct.
Only the nonpartisan?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff on 136? Debate by the council? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Bray.
Aye.
Carroll.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Lubert.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Pope.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schulte.
Aye.
Scrivener.
No.
Weber.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we will move on to, we've already covered 2012, 24 earlier. Now we'll move into number 19. 19 is a spot on our agenda that citizens can come forward and speak about any specific bill or resolution or anything else that's really on their mind today. And I have 3 people signed up: Donna Dietz, Walter Schroeder, and Stephanie Bell. Is that correct? All right. First on the agenda, Ms. Donna Dietz. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address, even though we all know you. Hi, Donna.
Hey, Eric. My name is Donna Dietz, 620 East High, and I'm president of the Downtown Jefferson City Association. In an effort to give input to the City of Jefferson regarding the proposed conference center, the Downtown Jefferson City Association supports utilizing the preferred site on McCarty Street. Obviously, there are many reasons that this site makes sense to the Downtown Association, but we also believe that it is in the best interest of the city, its citizens, and the success of the conference center itself. Some of those reasons are as follows. Research by numerous consultants with which the city is contracted have summarized that the McCarty site is the preferred site for placement of the conference center. Many of us have spent many years working on the conference center idea and appreciate the work that's been done by the city council in preparation of the RFP for the center. Meeting the RFP criteria and working with the research done by local committees and the consultant leads to the conclusion that this is the best site. Economic development is the biggest impact of the conference center, both as a boon to the construction industry and the resulting retail expenditures. The growth of downtown area in the new business and residential development are the perfect lead for the conference center. Persons attending conferences want to explore the uniqueness of their host city. Our downtown area combines history with unique businesses, quality restaurants, and retail establishments. As demonstrated year after year with Lincoln, Helias, and JC homecomings, those streets swell with walkable areas for exploration. Events and tours are also important, with conference planners choosing their site for their gathering. The events that we have downtown, whether they're weekends or weeknights, such as Living Windows, Hidden Spaces, Secret Places, Thursday Night Live, basically put us into that category. Our uniqueness isn't just the retail and activities that we have to offer downtown. From January to May, we see the importance of the downtown's proximity to the Capitol. We're proud of our standing as the state capitol, and many of the conferences that will be arranged will be in connection with the legislature and the historical aspects of the Capitol building and the museums around here. Walkability, according to the book For the Love of Cities, is one of the primary reasons that people fall in love with their hometowns and with the towns that they like to visit. Walkability has to be a major factor in the convention center that we choose and the site for that. As taxpayers, our position is also based on the fact that the voters elected to support the lodging tax based on the proposition that the center would be located near downtown or at least the near east side of the MSP. These pre-qualified sites have been worked over and over by our consultants and sold to the citizens of Jefferson City as most appropriate and economically feasible for our conference center. Downtown parking is one question that keeps coming up for us as members of the association, and it is our position that the use of the McCarty Street site requires a choice between a downtown parking garage at McCarty and Madison or at the McCarty and Broadway site. There's no choice. We would support having that garage in the near proximity to the conference center. It's walkable, and according to both city investigation and downtown parking trends and the anecdotal information, it would work for us. We want to follow through on what's been planned for the 50 years that this has been explored, and we want to make it the right choice, and we believe that the site on McCarty Street would be the right site for the Downtown Association.
Donna, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Is there any questions of Ms. Dietz this evening? Donna, thanks for all you do. You guys do a lot for the community. We definitely appreciate it. Next, I have Dr. Walter Schrader of Old Munichburg. Doctor, it's always good to see you. October's not that far away. This isn't on the record, but since we're here and I'm kind of the talk show host, at least right now while you're handing that stuff out, where are we going to move the Dotson races to? You need to call me about that. We don't have to do it right now, but I know there's a big mound of dirt there.
If we get the Hawthorne Bank finished, we'll be all right, but we don't think they'll finish it.
Walter, back to this agenda. It says here you're here to talk to us about conference center
I'm
location.
here to talk to you about
You have
the
the floor, sir.
conference center site, but my name is Walter Schrader. I live at 2705 Isherwood Drive in Columbia, Missouri, 65202. And there's not a single person in Columbia who doesn't envy the efficiency of your snow removal here in Jefferson City.
Touche.
I'm representing the executive board of the Old Munichburg Association, and we support the resolution of that association in all the 6 points that they've made. I'm not going to read this complete statement that I've handed out to you, but I'd like to note that we do have our restaurants in the South Side. We have in the South Side the business which is most visited by tourists in Jefferson City and the one most requested by tour groups coming to Jefferson City, and that's Central Dairy, of course. We'd like you to know that we have more than 30 properties on the National Historic Register that make a much more pleasant view to visitors than looking at parking lots around a large mall. And then this long paragraph in here I want you to pay particular attention to. We call your attention to the decaying houses just across the expressway from the McCarty Street site. Most of these houses on Broadway and West Elm, we're talking about just above Zesto, were bought by two landlords who speculated 20 or more years ago when a convention center was proposed for the McCarty Street site. And as you know, land speculators hold onto their properties without improving or even maintaining them, expecting them to be demolished for development. Some of those properties have now deteriorated until they barely meet code requirements. In fact, I would suggest that there are two uninhabited properties in there simply because they don't meet code requirements, and my term for them is derelict. You'll agree that they are the most visible eyesore along the expressway in Jefferson City for both visitors and local residents. A convention center on McCarty Street would very likely result in some action by these intransigent landlords. And the last paragraph refers to credibility with the voters when they voted for the lodging tax. Thank you.
Walter, thank you very much. Any questions for Walter tonight? Walter, thanks for everything you do, and especially everything you do for Old Munichburg. Let's give him a round of applause, because he doesn't always get to see what we get to do as a community, obviously, because of his efforts. Thank you, sir. All right, next we have Miss Stephanie Bell. Stephanie, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you. Stephanie Bell, 136 Riverwood Drive. I'm also here on behalf of the Downtown Association to just reiterate what Donna said, but I'd also urge the council to consider the perspective of meeting planners. And as a meeting, you have these statewide associations, they have these meeting planners, and as a meeting planner, it's important to drive people to your conference. They're trying to use these meetings and these conferences to make money for their own associations. And so I'd encourage you to keep that in mind. So meeting planners are constantly looking at attendees' perspectives. And I read an article recently that said there are 5 drivers for meeting site selection, and one is entertainment options. And when they talk about entertainment options, the question is it within walking distance of restaurants, retail, and nightlife? And that's why that downtown site is so important, is that when these people are choosing those sites, that's what they're looking at. I found an article that recently focused on the case of the Charleston Convention Center, and they found that attendee satisfaction was directly correlated with ease of access to downtown Charleston. So having those conferences in a place where people are really satisfied with the conference will keep that conference center thriving. Several associations have site selection criteria where they line out in policies what they're looking for when they go to pick. And among those things are walkability, places of interest, history, culture, restaurants. The National Communication Association lists walkability of entertainment, dining venues, outside of the hotel or convention center. These are all things that speak positively and point to the downtown location. In addition, as a meeting planner, they look at cost. And one thing with the downtown location is you wouldn't have to shuttle people across town to get to these things. And so all of those things, cultural, nightlife, entertainment, the Capitol, all of these things are within walking distance of the downtown conference center location. So as a meeting planner, that's what they're looking at. They have to offer the conference at a low cost to their members, and they want to do it for low cost for their own association. In addition, I went to a conference recently, and it was interesting to me. They threw up a picture on a slide, and it had, it had a Walmart, a McDonald's, a Red Lobster, and a Subway, and they said, "Where is this?" No one could say where it was, because every town has one of those. And they said, "This is what we live in today. We live in the United States of Generica." And no one goes to a city to see their Walmart, their McDonald's, their Subway. What they do go to see is they go to see their South Bank, their Samuels, their Cork, their Coffee Zone, the Grand, Madison's. They go to see these things, and that's what's going to draw people to our town and draw conferences here. And so that's why the downtown site is so important. In addition, they're drawn to see the MSP, the mansion, the Capitol, all of those things. And being close to that, we feel, is why the downtown location is so important.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. Any questions for Stephanie? All right. Carrie, do you have a question for Stephanie?
Well, sort of question or comment, and you don't really have to come back up, but I know I couldn't agree with all three of you more, but I was just going to ask if there were others in the crowd with you three that maybe didn't want to get up to speak, that maybe felt the same way. If I don't know if you wanted to mention if you all were together, because I recognize a lot of faces in the crowd.
If you're here on behalf of downtown Jefferson City, please stand. Or Columbia and Old Munichburg. No. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you all very much for being here. I know you're very business oriented, and we do appreciate your input. Anything else? Any other comments under 19? Seeing none, under number 20, any council and staff discussion of presentation topics made this evening. Moving on to 21, any new business to bring before the city tonight? Seeing none, next we will have unfinished business. Mr. Mihalovich, Rick.
I'd like to move to discuss the conference center selection process.
And that was seconded by the other Rick and Rick. At this point in time, we will have that discussion. I understand that you have some handouts. While you're doing that, we will take a quick 11-minute recess. March 18th meeting, we'll try not to have around 4. The maker of the motion had brought something forward. Rick, what was your intentions on what we have in front of us now?
Okay, I believe you got a handout now, and the intent is to, I'd move to discuss the conference center selection process draft, and I'd like to have a motion to that effect.
Okay. First?
I'll second it.
And second again. Okay. Was that your motion before the recess, or are you making this your motion now?
It actually, I didn't change the motion any. I think I just...
Your intent was this draft,
well,
is that correct?
We have the paper in front of us, so that,
okay.
That is maybe more clear to you all now.
Okay. Drew, good to go? All right. Voice vote? Okay. All in favor of doing that and taking up discussion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right. Now we're on the conference center selection process draft. This is kind of a work session type of an environment, so to speak, at this time of night. So, Mr. Mihalovich, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'd ask for the council's indulgence in this, as the goal is to move this this conference center discussion forward in a public venue, and for us to communicate our intent to our potential partners, and ensure that they have confidence that we can bring this to success. Before you have a handout that had been emailed to folks with regard to a process, and all of, I think I've discussed this with just about everyone. So I don't know that I need to go at blow for blow, but I will ask for questions. As you can see, the page 1, phase 2 calls for a conference workstation, which is now, to review the process and timeline for selection. It asks for us to look at the criteria, and I don't know that we have enough time this evening to really consider them in full degree. And C's been modified to say the city administrator will select a conference center review team as per council instructions, that is the desired way to proceed. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure, I can. Rick and I and the mayor briefly discussed this, and the issue is that if the city council appoints a selection group or a facilitator group which may be jumping ahead a little bit before he explains what his thought is on that. But if the council appoints a selection group, then that is a public body, the way the Sunshine Law works. That if there's a public body and that a public body appoints someone, then they're also a public body. And in order to avoid posting all those meetings and having minutes and going into closed session, typically those types of groups are appointed by the city administrator because he's not a public body. If the intent is that this group would just be staff, then that works perfectly well. If you want to appoint some other folks outside the staff to do it, members of the community or what have you, then you may have to look at actually making the council appoint it. But I just kind of want to throw that out, but I think Councilman Mihaljevic will probably explain what he's looking for, what his thoughts are on this thing.
Well, I think in the short description of that conference review group or technical group, whatever you want to call them, they're going to provide us input on the 8 criteria that we've identified and any additional criteria that the RFP already currently calls for. That criteria has been published in the RFP process and will be what we've asked the proposers to follow in part 2 of our phase 2. So this resource group will come back to us with a recommendation of their findings, and ultimately it is the responsibility of the council to vote on the proposer of choice and enter in a contract. So that's the purpose of that group. Item 1D, we're under this process that's a draft. The staff will prepare objective analysis and criteria for the council to review. Instead of a scoring system, the evaluation system will be predetermined based on the RFP and council wishes. Okay. Item 2 is that this group identified by the city administrator will conduct a pre-bid meeting with all proposers, and this will identify all the RFP and the criteria for evaluation. Any questions that can't be answered at this point will come back to us for any future addendums, so that the council is always involved in answering questions that can't be provided to the proposers. Item 3 is from our questions. The staff does develop the final RFP with addendum and sends it out for bid. Page 2 calls for a second council work session, and I don't know if this if you all agree on this date, but this is a draft. The council will review the final draft addendum and will include questions that have been raised at the pre-bid meeting. This probably can't work based on this timeline, but additionally, it will clarify issues with regard to the RFP. Examples could be multiple site proposals, any incentives that we will or will not offer, number of hotel rooms required, which wasn't specifically stated in the RFP. Item 5, the final RFP criteria and addendum sent to proposers to complete by May 17th under this proposal, the draft. And then during that process, all questions are to be funneled to a identified person, and so that there is a single point of contact. That's pretty typical, I think, with city bidding to do it in this fashion. Item 7 is the group itself. The resource group will identify, will evaluate the proposals individually as a group. They will receive their ratings, and at some point, item 8, public review and comment period will occur, and that will additionally provide input to the from the community to the process, to the proposals, and ultimately that will come to the council. Phase 3, page 3. The council will have a conference work session that will review the findings of that resource group and all the public comment. The council will review the responses and either choose to go to negotiation with 1, 2, or reject all proposals. That is the thumbnail sketch of what I've worked with in terms of not just me, but others that have had input, and I'm just the deliverer of information. Page 4 describes tonight the 3 goals, which I think are a little bit, maybe a little bit lofty for what we can accomplish in this this time. But we could strike item 2 because I'm proposing, or we're proposing, that be city administrator instead of council. And so we could take up, if you'd like, for discussion, the review of the process and the timeline for selection, and jump to 3, to the degree at which you wish, and your indulgence is to start refining the criteria listed below that is actually lifted from the RFP. And you'll see my check marks there are my thinking, and I wouldn't even guarantee that to be coherent, but it is my kind of thumbnail sketch of what could be underneath those criteria. These criteria would give our proposers more of a direction of what we mean by economic impact, quality of aesthetic design, functionality, and the others. With that, I just, as an introduction, I'll open it up back to you, Mayor.
Rick, first of all, I want to thank you for your work on this behind the scenes. I know we've had several conversations. I know you've talked to individual council members. At this point in time, we have a motion and a second on the floor to.
I think that already passed.
What's
It was
that?
to discuss it, wasn't it?
Oh, okay, right. But discussion's here, though. But that still is the main motion, is this entire document, correct?
I think all the motion was to bring it up and discuss it.
Okay, okay.
If
So we won't be voting
there's-
on it at this point in time unless
Right.
someone would call
There's
the
no
question.
motion on the table right now.
Someone could call the
Believe-
question. No, they couldn't.
No,
Never
they'd
mind.
have to make a
Just
motion.
just discussion. Okay. Discussion then. Or does someone have a motion? Or Ralph.
Where are we in the process at this time? Last time I remember whether we got we got some proposals and we asked for some questions and clarifications, and that was not completely successful. I mean, don't we still have some questions about the?
Drew.
Let me kind of answer that question, but more important, we're in open, so we got to be real careful about what particular things we're talking about. So we want to make sure we don't talk about the particulars of the actual proposals that have been made. The rest of I think the answer to that question, though, is they have submitted the answers to the questions, and we now need to figure out how we want to go forward. There may be questions that are still floating around in your minds, and I think that's the goal, is to mold it down and figure out how we mold it further.
Drew, if I had to try to describe this to my daughter, for instance, would this group basically be a conduit or pipe between the council and the developers, so that the council could input what they want the developer to know as far as aesthetics, whatever it might be, allowing the developer or developers to answer that question back through that conduit or through that group?
I believe that's kind of what Councilman Mihalovich's thought process was, is that you could send this group to go find out ask questions the council have on their mind, get what questions they have, and try to bring the product a little bit closer to us. And I think the concern, your other option is that the council does that as a body as a whole, which is perfectly fine. It's just harder to get everybody together than it is to go, send us to do it.
Right.
Well, I think that's a good summary. The resource group would be our conduit, be our way to ask the questions and delve into the responses that these proposers provide us. We've got to trust this group and their ability to research out the options, research out the responses, and obtain public comment, and that's yet kind of unidentified. There is sort of another way we could do. I plan to bring up a guest here, but I'd like to have a little bit more discussion on this before I introduce the guest.
Councilman, I just have a question. You know, we talked about the committee or the CCRG as being a conduit, but I'm concerned about 7A, which seems to sort of imply that group, and I'm just asking because if it's going to be staff that are doing this, that seems to imply to me that the staff group would be making some sort of evaluation and recommendation to the council. Is that correct?
Well, we've changed this intent of this group. I think what's real important is if you look at the 8 criteria, as a body, I don't know that we have the experience to really answer those 8 items. I mean, maybe all of us would have an opinion about aesthetics, but could we all evaluate it on a financial feasibility study, or could we all have the ability to look at the total economic impact to the city? Those 8 things in total is what we're trying to find the expertise to deliver back to us. So with confidence that when they say this one is really looks like it knocked the ball out of the park in regard to feasibility, we trust that, and we will take that into our deliberations. They didn't vote for us, but it's real critical that this group now, by your selection, a couple of people, but it's maybe important that somehow they bring in resources to help in making determination over those 8 criteria. And we're able to add a criteria according to RFP if we need to be.
As a follow-up to that, Rick, with your idea here, could the conduit or selection process group, could they call in, quote unquote, an expert witness from the CVB, for instance, like our new director, to say, you know, what do you think here? You know, what's the probability of this, this, and this? Is that something they could do?
I think it'd be very prudent.
Right.
I think they wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't bring in those kinds of expertise.
Mr. Henry.
Rick and Councilman Mihalovich, I'd like to thank you for kind of getting this together and discussing this with us kind of individually. My one concern is the timeline with this. I mean, we're going basically all the way to June, as this looks. You're talking May 20, a work session May 27th. Is there any way to condense this to where we're not pushing this out that far, or is it a way to get some of these things in without having to push this out that far to make a decision?
At what point, Rick, and I think I hear what Larry's saying. Are you worried about this council and the turnover of the council also? Okay. Rick, at what point on here would you draw the line and say if we were to get to this point, things would keep moving along up, obviously towards the new council after that? I think your whole idea with this, if I remember right, and I know we've talked several different times, but I thought the whole idea was to have a selection criteria process, really the recipe kind of pre-made. So this council could do that, and that once bids were coming back in however many days, whenever that might be in the near future, that the new council and people at that time would have a recipe in order to pick the person or persons that we would want to deal with. Is that the general idea, Rick, still?
Yeah, and I don't know that this timeline is perfect, and it's of course the council's decision on the timeline. We seat a new council on, April the 15th? Okay.
And actually the 15th doesn't really count because it's a split council night. It's the old council and then the new council. Bob?
And I too thank Rick. I mean, there was obviously a lot of work went into this, and I know he made some phone calls to us individually and kind of bounced some ideas off of us, and I appreciate the effort that you made. I guess I'd like to review a little bit. We kind of departed from the norm with this convention or conference center selection, in that normally the staff does these evaluations, in most of the bids that we do, and they kind of winnow this down and so forth. And I guess in review, I know you told us before, Nathan, but would you kind of explain again why we went to the full council evaluation process as opposed to taking the normal evaluation process?
Well, I don't think there's any necessary particular explanation to that other than that that's what the councils seem to want. There's been a lot of discussion about the committee, what council committee would review this and that sort of thing. And, you know, it's obviously a highly charged issue. And I think we as the staff certainly felt it was best for the council to be involved in this. And if you're going to bring in part of the council, you should bring in all of the council.
Okay. And it's pretty obvious to me, and I think probably to others, that in some ways we feel like we've been spinning our wheels because we're not sure exactly which direction to go. And again, Rick, you've tried to help us get past that obstacle. But I wonder if maybe we haven't somewhat demonstrated that we're a pretty unwieldy group, as you know, 10 of us in trying to work on this. I think that's part of the reason we're spinning our wheels a little bit. But I'm also wondering if maybe we're shifting. We're going back to what we had before. Only we're going to ask outside folks to do it as opposed to having the staff do it now. And that does look to me like, in looking at this, that it's going to require extra time and effort and even extra decisions on our part as we try to develop this criteria. Now, you've laid out a good outline for us to work with, but I could see quite a bit of time just spent on deciding out of these 4 or 5 pages what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And so I don't know. I thought we were getting to a point where it was just about time to bring the 3 proposers in and hear what they had to offer and evaluate it and move forward. And it's not that I don't see some merit to this, but I just wonder if we're making it more complicated than it is.
Dr. Pope.
Well, I would like to echo the thanks for you making all this effort. I think it would be a great goal that before this council changes, that we have this, have made a decision about how, so that from day one, new members would know the process that was in place to make these decisions. It's unrealistic, and it's probably not good governance for a council in its final days to make a decision this big. It should be made by the next council. But I don't think that prevents us from making a big effort to try to get the process finalized as how that new council will start from day one working on this. I think, Bob, that one of the you said it, one of the reasons that maybe we have had some difficulty is there have been so many of us. Historically, all the previous times I have had anything to do with conference center, there was an ad hoc committee. On previous councils, there was an ad hoc committee who did, of 5 people, who could concentrate and spend their time and then report back to the rest of us. And that's a model that we haven't used most recently, and it does make it more difficult to get something accomplished. On the other hand, in the previous times, when we couldn't say ready, aim, fire, because that hasn't been able to be really done until we got the additional lodging tax to where we really had something to offer other than general revenue. We do now have an income stream. So from that perspective, we're closer than we've ever been to offering kind of a downstroke in this project. In other words, the public-private partnership, we do have something financially besides, either tax incentives. We actually have income stream to offer a developer. So with that in mind, we have the money. We all know how we want to go about it, and it is mentioned in the final thing, which has been the will of this particular council, but not necessarily future councils. But in 1036, he has cost to the city, and the item prevents further or annual subsidies beyond the 9 million. So in that case, in that particular statement, he has added that the will of this council has been beyond things that we are able to do statutorily, tax abatement, so forth, parking within our parking funds if it's a downtown project. And we did rule out the IRBs, I thought, from a statutory viewpoint, so that can't be. But we now have a cash flow. We have the ability to use parking funds, and we have the ability to abate. And so, one of the things I would hope that part of this determination is of how we go forward is that we not give up what we have as a right to be leading much of this to staff, but to have staff work with a smaller ad hoc committee to move this forward, that then there's consensus among 5 of us, or 5 of the future folks, who then would bring it to the remaining 5, and of course that 5 needs to get a vote or 2, and then I think 5 would be easier for the staff to work with. It's tough to get, I mean, we do it all through budget session, and that's a marathon, but to make this, so that would be something, if we can get farther along on this so that the next council can be at the stage of making some decisions, I think we would be able to move farther faster if it were an ad hoc committee of 5 that the mayor can appoint. The mayor can appoint the chairperson for that committee. The mayor's in charge of appointing that and getting that moving, and that committee working with staff. We might be able to get farther and the best part of this is Rick has offered us the opportunity to add facilitation from outside people in the community, and I think that's a great contribution to this. An ad hoc committee of 5, help from staff, all of that material that has to be brought together by staff, and then having the mayor or the administrator or both bringing in outside people to help clarify the things that we're not sure of. That's how I would like to see this happen.
Rick, before that, and thank you, Dr. Pope. The only problem that I had as I was thinking about this and looked at this is that when you say a council, an ad hoc committee of 5 council members, I think it would be better if all council members were part of it, because it's hard for some people to hear one thing in one meeting and try to take what a vendor or developer's trying to say, and then 2 weeks later at a different meeting, all 10 members be together, but they didn't quite hear exactly how it was said at that point. So, Rick,
Follow-up.
Go ahead.
A follow-up to that is, I don't mean only the 5 at the time of the presentation. I'm talking about getting at the point where, and Nathan can remind us about this, in previous, as we've gone through this process, have we not had an additional conference center committee? I don't remember when it was the council of the whole.
Yeah, certainly the last go around there was a conference center committee. I believe there was 1 or 2 councilpersons. I think Mr. Scrivener was on that, and I'm thinking that Mr. Crane was on it.
Yeah, he was on it.
Okay.
I think after that, Carrie, weren't you and I on one along with Ralph? That was right before the lodging tax.
Well, when they had the 5 and Jim Penfold chaired it for a while, they actually took road trips. The 5 of them were able to go and actually visit sites, and honestly, we need to do the same. So whether or not it might be easier for all 10 of us or to have just the group of 5, I think it made it easier for reviewing and the more hands-on and the several hours and hours that needed to go into the detail.
Let me ask Rick a question with all of this conversation coming in. Was it your intent with this that all of the information that all of the planning or trips that Carrie just said, which would be, I mean, it's kind of tough for us to pick out a night that we can all meet from time to time, aside the trip. Was it your thought process as you were looking at this? I know you had some help from some other people, that the staff and/or this committee would be the one doing that?
That's
and
correct.
Reporting back to the council as a whole. So my question is this, Rick: at the end of the day, would we be getting the same information quicker with with what you have here?
I'd be remiss to say that I'd discussed this with Randy Allen as well, who's had a lot of experience, and we looked at this as a collaborative effort, really. And the idea is that if you look at the 8 criteria, provides the greatest long-term economic impact to all facets of development: quality of the aesthetic, functionality of design, economic feasibility, hoteliers' operating and marketing plans, cost to the city, capital outlay, and location. The idea is to get the best experts we can, the best advice we can on each of those. And all due respect to this group, the best of the best is out there that does this every day. And that was the idea. And I think I would like to indulge this group by, given the late time, I would like to introduce and welcome a person who has much experience in conference planning and seeing projects to successful completion. Some of us had the opportunity to meet Jerry Hagerman, architect from Bates & Associates with over 40 years of experience earlier. So I'd like to invite him to the podium so that you may get to his benefit of some of his knowledge, and maybe he actually sort of differs a little bit with the plan than that's presented here in terms of the resource group. So Jerry, could you join us?
Good evening. I just want to comment very quickly that I work with Rick over at Lynn State Technical College. I'm their campus planner there, and he shared some of these concerns with me, and so I've been acting as a sounding board for him to bounce issues off of, and I think so he asked me to be here tonight just as a resource to kind of help you through this. And I do want to be a resource on one point, and keep in mind with your schedule, these developers have a lot of work to do here, and they need some time to do that. They're going to need 6 weeks to respond to this criteria list that you have. They've got to put a concept design together. They've got to do urban study. They've got to do a lot of financial study, and then they've got to put it together in a sales package, and that all takes some time. I think it can fit the schedule that I've been hearing you talk about, but they do need some time in this process. I'm here as a resource just to help you where I can.
And I recognize that, and Rick made a great point, none of us are experts. Not, in fact, most of us, other than just having anecdotal, maybe having used conference centers or what have you, that's about the limit of our knowledge of that. So someone who has expertise, in my mind at least, is welcome, and would be very, very helpful. And I can understand Rick's comments, and I second them, quite frankly, that even meeting planners serving as experts on this resource group, or architects or developers or what have you, because quite frankly, when we ask for something, I don't know that we even know whether it's doable or not, or what's feasible, and so I thank you for coming, and I'm interested in hearing what other questions or what other comments you might have to the group tonight about how you might be able to assist us.
Jerry, I know you looked at earlier our criteria under Section 10. I'll make sure I don't ask anything that should be in a closed session, but a good question I think would be: do you think are we doing the most for economic impact? And my other question to you would be: is there something that you think we left off? Because we came up with that criteria based off what staff and some members here had. You're an expert, obviously, at this and how these come about. What are we missing?
Well, I have been on both sides. I've been on the public side and the private side of the development. And I will say that the criteria list is a good topical list. I think it would be good for a developer if you could give them a little more guidance in the subtopics, a little more definition, because some of these topics are so broad that it's going to scare them and delay them trying to interpret exactly what you're really after there. So I do think before you send this this list to the developers, and I do think you need to get this in front of them so that they can get to work on it. But I
Excuse me, Jerry, just point of information. Drew, this is already in the RFP, right,
Yeah,
Roger?
it is. The criteria are already out, of course, and they've already submitted their bid back to us on it. I think maybe what referencing here is further defining what we want within those categories. Is that
yeah,
correct?
as I understand it,
A clearer picture, is that what you're trying to say?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me. Under phase one, there's criteria, I think is item 8 or 7, laid out the qualifications for phase one. These are phase two qualifications or criteria. So they are different than phase one.
You know, we had a conversation briefly before the meeting, and I'm thinking about some of the things you said there and what you just said, and I guess can you clarify for the council the advantages and disadvantages of very specific criteria versus very general criteria? I guess would be the two kind of extremes.
I think you're referring to the way we assess it after we get the response.
Yes.
Yes. You have a choice when you start this process of trying to be as analytic in the process as you can and assign numbers and values to these different criteria and the subtopics within the criteria. Or you can be more subjective in it. You can use these, you're obliged to the developers now for them to understand that you are putting weight on these criteria. But you don't have to justify as a point system. And in fact, in trying to justify every point that you're making in a decision you make, you really are setting yourself up for argument and to be challenged. So my first suggestion was that this be a subjective process, which it helps you because you're not an analyst that can usually assign points to these very easy. In fact, it's hard to make it all these issues that are abstract and regarding aesthetics. It's hard to give it a point system, even if you're working in that industry. So my first recommendation was that it be subjective.
A couple of questions for Nathan. Did any of our 3 proposers ask for any of our feasibility documentation?
Hold on a
Previous
second. Drew's got a...
I'm thinking we probably don't want to talk about that in open session.
Our feasibility study. I'm trying to get at, are we using our previous feasibility studies that previous councils, is that our feasibility studies?
Great thing about having 2 attorneys.
Sorry.
I think I can answer that to satisfy the two of you. I believe, and Ms. Stevenson's here can maybe remember more clearly than me, but I believe that the RFP referenced the 2 previous studies.
Okay, and is it a fair question to
Is that
ask
correct?
if anybody requested that information?
Well, I was dodging that question to keep
Okay.
him happy.
Okay, well, we'll leave that for another discussion.
Okay.
But I guess my big question is, I believe we utilize the feasibility studies in the development of our RFP. And so we still continue to use our, have we done 3 of them altogether? I mean, it goes on and on, but
two
our
in modern
most
history.
recent feasibility study, at,
2 of them since electricity.
yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, we do have that
Right.
document to use as a reference point.
There's 2 studies that we've commonly used in the 10 years that I've been here. The Price Waterhouse study, which is sometime in the 1990s, and the PKF study, which was done by the connection with Garfield Traub. So that would have been, well, it was why Steve was here, so 5 to 7 years, something like that.
Yeah, it was 2008. So the specific information in that study probably needs refreshed. And I would expect your developers to do that very quickly. They're going to do their own feasibility study, and you need for them to. You want them to show you how they're going to be successful. So you're going to get their study as a part of this, and hopefully they're going to use more recent data than 2008.
Rick, did you have any follow-up at all?
Only to respond to how equipped do you think we are, or what is your suggestion about how we develop our understanding of feasibility? Because one could add up 60 points just on economic feasibility and those sort of items, cost related.
Yes, I'll relay what I told Rick. The proving that you can make this an economically successful project is the #1 issue that you want brought to the table. My first concern was, it said economic feasibility, 20%, but as I look at these others, they start totaling up, and it totals more like 60%, which is where I would think that you would want it. You wanted this response to be weighted very heavily in economic performance. And you also asked about schedule. I think one of the things we discussed that you need to think about very quickly is I think we need to get this on the street as soon as you can to give those developers time to stay on the schedule that you'd like to have. You'd discussed what information or how far we would be along in the process when the new councilman came on, and what level of decisions that they would make and what level of decisions would be made before they come. So I think the key is to get this back out on the street for the developers, and then you can work your schedule to the time you give them.
I have a question for Rick. When he says get this, in your eyes, I know you're the author of this, obviously with others and help and other council members, is there a particular part of this that we need to quote unquote move on tonight then?
Well, actually, it would have been to me the building out of the criteria where I have the check marks. Those are my thoughts. It needs to be the collective.
And are you referring to page 4?
I'm referring to page 4 and 5.
Okay.
And those check marks are mine.
Right.
So
I think what you're trying to say is that we, as a group, need to have a lot of discussion on exactly what 1030-1
right.
actually is, or
and
3-1.
it would be my suggestion that we work that out at a work session maybe as soon as next week.
We actually have, or we did have, a work session on hold, so to speak, for next Monday, which is our normal night anyway, correct, Drew? Okay. So if we wanted to entertain this at that time, I imagine we could. The other question would be, what else do we need to do for that meeting? Because I think we owe it to the developers and the city and the new council and everyone involved that we get this to the point that the developers know exactly what we're thinking and they can go out and get their things together. Drew?
Just as a thought to chew on, I guess. as I sit here, I think you might want to make the threshold decision about whether the council as a whole wants to be the body reviewing these things, or if you want to do a smaller group. Because if it is that we just bring those three in and they make a presentation to you as the council as a whole, then you will define those things as you see fit in the meeting. Because as our guest has stated, it's subjective now, and the council can make their decisions based on their whatever priorities they place on it. You would probably, and the smarter folks can correct me on this, but you probably only need to define these further if you're going to send in the staff group to make these decisions, because we want to bring back whatever product the council wants to see. And I haven't obviously I've only known about this today, so I may be just off base on that.
Carrie.
I agree with Drew that we should decide tonight how we want to proceed, whether it's the council of the whole or a committee of 5. And I'm thinking about making a motion to do that. Before I do, I wanted to get Jerry's input. My thought would be, if we, after hearing the discussion tonight, and to be the most efficient, if we should suggest that we have a council committee of 5 of us to do this. And of course, the remaining 5 would be encouraged to attend, just like the rest of our committee structure. There's half on, and the other half are notified to try to attend the meeting. And if it's to be all 10 of us, I'm completely fine with that too. I'm curious your input with your experience. Also, I would say, as far as bringing others in, I wanted to hear your input on that, if we should, and that may not need to be decided tonight, but one key person that does need to come in fairly soon would be Director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Diane Gillespie, who is here tonight, who happens to have extensive conference center experience. We're very fortunate to have her on staff. She's excellent and very qualified, but so lucky that she has that experience as well, right as we're in this process of building this conference center. So trying to figure out how we want to structure the committee. If I were to throw this out as a motion, I would also move that Rick would be the chair. And I appreciate the work and the background you've done. This is what we've kind of been looking for, is a little bit of guidelines. And lastly, I think the other missing component has been a professional, a person in the field like yourself, Jerry, and maybe staff could tell us how, if we wanted to have somebody, either you or somebody like you in your position, that can give us the professional background, because from what I understand, you've been involved with countless convention center projects, or conference centers and convention centers. So bringing you to lead us through this, because we want to do it right, and it's not a project we do every day, and so we want to really, really know before we miss something, because last time we did miss something. We missed exhibit space, and we almost got to the end and didn't have it, and learned very quickly that that wasn't going to work. So by having an expert in the field to guide us through. So,
Carrie, I've got just a quick thing I want to ask him real fast, if I could. And actually, I'm sorry, this is for Drew. Drew, if it ends up being a committee of staff and outside people, does it become quote unquote?
It's a public body.
Is it the conduit, or is it the public body and the thing that we had earlier?
It is a public body if it is appointed by a public body. So if the council appoints those members, it will be a public body, which isn't insurmountable. Just you have to post, keep minutes, go in closed session if you're going to closed session and such.
Nathan, you have a question?
I have a question following up with Councilman Carroll's statement. She referred to you as an expert, and there's been a lot of people who've come in front of this distinguished body on the conference center subject claiming to be experts. Could you explain to the council, in case they don't know, what your credentials are?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if I'd call me an expert. I would first, I'm a facilitator. I've helped a lot of people through problems like this. And to answer your question specifically, my feeling is anytime you can get all the decision makers to the table so they can hear each other and they can make their decisions, the more timely the product is that you're producing. I'm an architect and planner. I was involved with Hammond's Industry, along with your lady back here, and we did 23 facilities that included hotels and convention facilities as a part of it in part of that time. I'm also a campus planner, so I do public facilities and complex facilities where we have to deal with the community planning issues of all the physical facilities and the developmental facilities. That's why I know that the most important thing we'll do is look at their pro forma and work from the pro forma out as you evaluate these, because if they can't show success, then there's no reason to go beyond that. The other thing I think at some point there needs to be some additional dialogue. One is you asked to minimize your risk, and I think you need a conversation about what that means, because there is risk when you're partnering in a development process. You can pass the bulk of that risk to that developer, but you still inherit risk when you do this. Another issue is I was pleasantly surprised to see $9 million as infused into this that you were willing to participate with. If I'm the developer, it seems to me that you've got an expectation for that, and my thought would be that you've got a solution that you're wanting me to work toward, which involves a need for public investment, because many of these developers are out there financing these things and building them on their own. And so there's still some questions that I think you need to be thinking about, because you're probably going to be asked somewhere along the way.
Drew, I had a point of information hopefully you can help us with. If we were to bring in all three proposers to the entire body, from what I just heard him say, is that under contract negotiations, and would those talks, where do they line up?
Yes, they would. It would be closed session of whatever group it was. I'll say one thing I want to do, because I have a ringer back here with many years of experience in doing all this. She had voiced some caution, I guess, about the meeting with all three of them at once, because you may tie yourself into a corner in your negotiations. Just balance that against another concern that one developer hears something different than the other developer. So that's just something to ponder as you go to that stage.
Roger, what are your thoughts?
Well, certainly I'm in agreement with what Jerry has commented on so far. The one thing he hasn't talked about yet is the finance side a great deal, and certainly the finance proposal that we would get from these folks is going to be very important. I agree with Jerry, though. We're concerned about timeline, that they will need time, because follow up on what Ralph started out asking the question with, where are we today? The council made the decision to select all three to move forward to phase 2. All three have been submitted letters telling them that they've been approved for phase 2, and the letter outlined what is in the RFP for submission requirements for phase 2. So that's where we're at today.
Bob.
I guess in a way we've kind of made a leap here because we've been introduced to you, and you've given us some opinions, but what we really haven't asked you is, to what extent are you willing to help us, and what does that help entail? Are you here by your presence? Are you telling us that you're willing to facilitate ongoing process, or exactly what is your level of?
Well, I'm going to, if I delve much deeper, I'm going to have to charge you something, because it's taken some time. But there's also another person that's not here that is the finance expert, and that's Dave Mashburn. He did all of the much of the development for Hammond's Industry on the hotels that we were talking about. So there is a fee. I don't know until we have some kind of scope defined. I don't know what to tell you it is, but it will be fair, and it won't be extreme.
But you are saying that you are, I mean, you're prepared, obviously you wouldn't be here if you weren't, but you are prepared to accept that level of responsibility if you were appropriately compensated.
Yes, sir.
Drew, I have a question, or it has to do with quote unquote picking someone like Jerry. If we
Right.
decided to do that, could you walk us down that? How long does it take? What's the Terry?
I'm
all
bringing in
these
the ringer
years?
here. We do have a process set out in the code for selection of. But I'm gonna
Okay.
let Terry do it because she knows it just like that.
Welcome, Terry. Thanks for being here at this late hour.
It would need to have a scope of services, and it would be through a request for qualifications process. That would go out to different firms. They would respond to that. It would be evaluated on a committee evaluation, and then proceed with negotiations after the most qualified was selected.
I'd suspect you'll have a lot of interest in that. I mean, there's a lot of people who've already talked about it.
Time frame.
Depending on what you put into and decide on your scope, once that's out, it would be at least on the street for 2 weeks, and then there would be the recommendation, and then you would negotiate on cost.
And would it be, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you and Roger. Actually, I'll ask Roger first. Roger, in this scenario, if we were going to head down this route, and I have no idea if we are or aren't, but if we were, I'm assuming that entity, that third party, would be between us and the responders, the developers, or they would simply just be there to help us.
They'd be a resource to the council or to this team that Rick's talking about setting up.
So in other words, you could do it either with a team or without. Is that right? In other words, you could just hire a consultant through RFP.
But I think what would be on the table would be you would have a lead facilitator with the group that we decide, whether it be council as suggested or the resource group appointed by the city administrator. But it would be led by a facilitator and then appropriately evaluated by folks that I think he's proposing some person to evaluate the financial portion of the RFP.
Yeah, in my case, he's just a partner in doing these things, so he would just be like an extension of me.
So Drew, what's next?
Well, I'm going to go back with what I said before, which is, unless somebody certainly disagree, but it seems to me you need to make a decision about what group is going to make that ultimate decision, because that then, in my mind anyway, depends on whether you need to then go further down that line. And I don't know at what point you decide whether you want a facilitator or not. I mean, my recommendation would be first decide who the group is, then decide if you want a facilitator, and then refine the criteria if you need to. But I have no expertise more than anyone else in this room about the best way to go forward.
Rick. Go ahead.
Well, I was prepared to say that maybe we ought to identify what the scope and the cost would be, and have our next work session next Monday, and we would start the process of what I would have identified as refining the criteria as a council of the whole.
In other words, taking up pages 4 and 5?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
And meanwhile, we would understand the scope and the cost associated with the facilitator, and we'd not made a decision on that particular expert group, but we're still moving down the road.
As far as what that scope would be, who would normally come up with that in this scenario? Is it this council? And if so, you're saying that wouldn't happen for another week? I mean, I'm just trying to play this out. It's kind of uncharted waters, obviously. Sean, I forget we have a builder here.
Well, I just have a clarification. I believe I understood a while ago the statement that we need to get this on the street quickly. It's my understanding from the RFP that the developers or the proposers should already be working on this list of criteria as a part of the RFP, in addition to a list of additional information that we've requested. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why we need to get this on the street quickly, because in my mind, they should already be working on it. Because it is a part of the RFP currently. And they have been sent letters stating that they are moving on to phase 2. Roger, did we give them in that letter, did we state a response date for phase 2 or?
No, we did not. We simply notified them and told them to begin working.
Okay.
And in the letter, we said at that time the plan was that the council was going to set up a meeting with them. So that's what we told them.
Okay, thank you.
Drew.
I was going to say the only concern Terry and I kind of talked about before is if we're refining, we can't change the rules of the game. We've already established what they are. We got to be careful that we're just helping them understand what we're looking for.
So really, I mean, when it comes right down to it, it's 10.3, which provides the long-term economic impact of all facets of development. It's not that we're going to try to change that wording. It just is we're going to try to give them more focus on what we meant by that. Would that be true? Rick, is that your intent?
I might also say that we just got an email today requesting that I want to get with you and inquire about the process before us. So there's questions out there, at least by one developer, that they're want to know our timeline and our process. So I agree that the criteria out there, they've got to be thinking about it. They've been invited, but this puts a little bit of meat on the bone. And I heard two things that seemingly at conflict: objectivity and subjectivity. We're talking about, I think, objectivity in terms of the criteria to give them focus. We're talking about subjectivity because we're all subject to our individual opinions and what the resource group brings to us and how much we value their input. Ultimately, we're going to just say thumbs up or thumbs down. We're not going to rate them objectively. I mean, you may choose to do that in your own mind. So that's to clarify maybe a little bit of the comment there. To move us forward in the most expedient manner, I think we still could benefit from having those criteria more objectively identified.
Say that last part.
I guess if we want to continue this plan, we need to feather out the criteria and put more meat on the bone, so to speak. And getting back to the point about process and responding to our potential partners is maybe we ought to agree on a timeline. And maybe that's what we do Monday, is we agree on a timeline. We could shoot that out and say that a pre-bid meeting is going to occur here. We expect your proposal to be done by this time, and then they could at least know that we have the intent of a deadline to be done then, so that these developers don't get interested in other projects.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. Thanks, Kerry.
Well, I was going to make the point that I thought when we left the last session we had on this, that we had agreed to call the proposers in one at a time, and I think Roger sort of verified my point before I made it again, but I'd like someplace along the line, and it could happen really quickly if it would help me, if we had like Diane Gillespie come forward and just present us some ideas about what meetings are like and what it takes to put on a meeting from her perspective. And I spoke on the phone to Randy Scher one day, who does a lot of this, and he offered some ideas. And so we've got some major hurdles to discuss, location-wise, parking, and one group has a world of parking and some has none, and so we need to hear the relative importance of location and the content to some extent of the building. And I know there's a lot of time to deal with that, but I think it would profit all of us to hear some of those ideas so we could be rolling them around in our head and beginning to prioritize some of that information, which we're eventually going to have to deal with. So I'd like to throw out the idea of having some people in the business come in and visit with us and just kind of talk us through what it takes and what they like in terms of a building, and so we could hear some of that.
And that's something that's forthright. That's coming down the road, obviously. Rick?
I sense that, you know, the night is getting later, and that it seems to me that people are, we had a long night the last Monday, and I think maybe this being out on the table, discussed, is a good time for us to mull it over, and maybe by next Monday, we can have decisions about the questions posed about this council as a whole, and maybe we'd have some numbers.
I'll give you my feedback as far as council as a whole. I think it needs to be council as a whole, only because it'd be hard for me to pick out 5 people, okay? And I also think, as the community, you're the 10 leaders of this community, and I think all of you, whether you're going out of your office or coming in, and whoever's going to take over your spot, they all deserve, every ward deserves to have 2 representatives when it comes to hearing these proposals. Carrie?
Thank you. I have a 5-part motion that I'll mention here. I move that the council as a whole move forward as the conference center committee with Rick Mihalovich as the chair, that we bring in Diane Gillespie to be part of that committee at this time, because this Convention and Visitors Bureau is actually collecting the tax that's for the conference center. Then we decide the scope at our next work session, the scope for a facilitator, and that we then, after we decide the scope, that we decide the scope at our next work session, and then we select a facilitator through the request for qualifications process. That's my 5-part motion, and would also ask that perhaps Jerry assist us with the timeline that we talked about tonight, coming up with a timeline. So should I repeat those 5 again, or did you get the 5 parts to the motion? Does that make sense?
Do you have 5, Drew?
Council as a whole. Number 2, Rick Mihalovich, chair. Number 3, bring in Diane Gillespie. Number 4, decide the scope for a facilitator at our next work session. And then number 5 would be to select a facilitator through the request for qualifications process after the work session. That's my motion.
Is there a second? Motion dies due to lack of a second. Rick, did you have follow-up for next week?
I think at this point, I think some of the aspects that Councilwoman Carroll brought up were good. I think that it would have been self-serving for me to second it, but I would prefer we just adjourn and then have a session next Monday with the agenda to be decided by the mayor.
I have that's fine with me. I have a question for Drew when it comes to council committees of the whole. Who normally approves those, Chairman? Or how does that work?
Well, if it's a council committee of the whole, then that excludes the mayor. If you're appointing a committee and it's of the whole, it's like the finance or the budget committee. The mayor is not a part of it, and then the body itself picks. I believe the body itself picks their own chair. I don't think it's the mayor pro tem. If the council just wishes to deal with it, it would be a work session on Monday. Does that answer your question?
I guess that's kind of what I was asking.
Okay.
Is that if we keep it at a work session level, it's the council
Council,
of the whole,
right.
with myself as
Right.
not necessarily chair, but just running the meeting.
Well, you would
basically.
be. I mean, you're the chair of
Of
a
the
council
council,
meeting,
period.
and all it would do
Right.
is just a council work session, which you're in.
Exactly.
If it changes it to a committee of the council as a whole, then it's like the budget committee where the mayor is not part of
It's
it.
no different than a regular work session.
Yes, correct. That's correct.
It's the same issue. Okay.
Correct.
At that point in time, unless there's any other discussion, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, guys, go back to number 24. We have approval of closed session minutes from March the 4th. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Oh, sorry. I need a motion in a second. It's getting late.
moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion